So this is the latest release from Disney Pixar. After a year since our last film, which was the Lightyear solo film, we meet Ember very early on in Element City, which is a city of the different elements: fire, earth, wind, water. Is missing heart for Captain Planet. But
Heart, yeah.
uh, this is not kind of a mixed city. Element City is not really built for everyone. We see that the fire people are kind of immigrants here. They've come from the fire land to settle in Element City, but they're not really welcome when they first come, and they have to kind of settle in more dilapidated parts of town, and very slowly over time build up their life. Ember and her family build this kind of fire store where they sell fire supplies to other fire people. Eventually, one day, the way we set up Ember is meant to kind of take over the business from her father, but we don't really know if that's what's right for her. She eventually runs into Wade Ripple, played by Mamadou Athey, who is a water person and who immediately and works for the city and writes her a bunch of tickets and said, "Hey, we got to shut this business down. This is not things aren't up to code." They fight, but they eventually kind of have to work together to solve problems on both sides of their family and kind of overcome differences between like their families and cultures in Element City. Also, strangely about infrastructure weaknesses.
Huh.
But that's kind of our plot. Zach, what did you think?
So Elemental, I think, had a very middling trailer. And we've talked about it on the show in the past weeks. If you've been listening, the trailer for this movie does not look outstanding. It looks very flat. It looks like a generic summer kids flick. I don't think any kids are getting excited watching the trailer for Elemental. But Pixar has a tendency to kind of give you a peek into what's going on, and then you actually get into it and discover there's a whole range of emotions involved, and it'll tug on your heartstrings and make you cry in the theater, right? Doesn't always work. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they miss. And I feel like in that sense, in the way that Elemental is going to like bring you to your knees and make you like question the life you've led, it is not one of those Pixar movies. I don't think it lands that way. But also on the other side of that seesaw, Elemental's better than it looks in the trailers, for sure. I think the trailers for this movie were weak, and of the couple that I've seen, both of them seem to follow this kind of like this like line that Wade and Ember are friends. Oh, they're friends, and Ember doesn't have to listen to her dad, and she can do what she wants. Isn't it great? Elements, right? Elements don't mix. Yeah, they do, Mom. It's called chemistry. Like just kind of a generic like approach, and it turns out like it's not that at all. Elemental's surprisingly romantic. When we finished, I told Christine I didn't know this was a rom-com. And she was like, "It's not a rom-com." I was like, "It is, absolutely. It's got hallmark scenes of a rom-com, like very much so. And also like a surprisingly poignant like statement on where we come from, right? And how we interact with others who are different than us. And it would be easy to say that it's just doing the Zootopia gag, right? Like I said it a lot going into this episode that it looks just like Zootopia, and it's just a city where a bunch of elements that don't mix have to learn to interact with one another. But like surprisingly, it takes a different spin in a way that I think is fresh enough that it can stand on its own. And I'm excited to talk about it. Andy, what did you think of Elemental?
Yeah, I liked it a lot more than I thought, and I mean, it's not the movie that's been advertised. Like the rom com aspect is just part of it. It's really more of a kind of this immigrant story and of this idea that as a second generation, you know, offspring of immigrants, the kind of this pressure that a lot of second generation people feel to kind of just follow in their parents' footsteps and do because of the sacrifices that came before you, even though it may not be right. Because we see that Ember doesn't really like working at the store. She's very short tempered. She's just not good with the customers, but she feels like she doesn't have a choice. She feels like, her father worked so hard, her family worked so hard, sacrificed so much to come here, and that she feels like she kind of has to do what they envisioned for her because of their sacrifice. So it's that's a very complex thing, kind of topic to deal with. Also, this idea of they say early on in the film, the city's not meant with fire people in mind, because the city is mostly built for the water people and the wind people and the earth people, but not fire people. So there's a very like it's kind of about segregation in a lot of ways, and just kind of like you can code this very much to places like it reminded me of like the Bronx in the 1950s and 60s when they just decided to put a freeway through it, and it didn't matter how that affected the people. And that's kind of the situation here, where the fire town is just kind of being neglected by the city, and it's kind of falling apart because of that. So there's a lot of kind of serious subtopics running underneath this.
Yeah, it's really obvious that this is a story about like people who are different, right? Like our kind of like group of fire people live on the like on the underside of Element City. Like there's a really great visual of this like tram that runs on this bridge over like Fire City, and it's a water tram, and water dumps over the sides of it, and all the fire people have to like live far away from it, and they resent it. And Ember sees it every day, and she's like, oh, like stupid, like completely different from me, don't care about us, right? Like it's like mud flying off wagon wheels. And the issue of like generational, I don't want to just use the term trauma, but fundamentally, like the feeling of like, well, my parents did this for me, so I have to do this for them, right? They've sacrificed for me, so I have to sacrifice for them, is surprisingly heartfelt because it comes from a place of genuine purpose. Director Peter Sohn said this is based on his life and when he was growing up and feeling like he had to honor traditions of his family, but also like wanted to chase animation and do something different and creative and get into like a different field. Like, he had a lot of issues with that. And the fire folks in this movie are very Eastern. It's not really clear like what culture they're specifically based on. But you got one, Andy? You think?
Well, I think they purposely avoid it being any specific culture, and but yeah, it's kind of like an Eastern European kind of like they come to Ellis Island, they settle in what is essentially New York.
And their right, and their culture is very different, right? Like they paint their signs in different fonts, and they live in like kind of clay housing structures, and all their tons of puns in the shop, like they sell cereal called Frosted Flames, and all their food is really spicy, right? Like it's different. And meanwhile, like Wade and the water folks are like, they live in Element City in high rises and penthouses, right? And they have great public transportation and don't have any problems at all. And everybody's dressed very nice, and they don't seem to want for anything. So you get a bit of classism. One of the things I really liked in the setting that I think is different from Zootopia, and I'll try to make this my last comparison to it. Not everybody's seen it, but Zootopia came out a few years ago from Disney. It's about a city full of animals. All the animals are different, and the whole big lean in that movie is predators versus prey, right? You're either a predator of other animals, or you're like a victim, right? And trying to blur that line over like who you are. This movie instead is about where you're from, right? Like it's not about like who is a predator and who is a prey. It's about like where you've come from and like where you're going, and how sometimes that can hold you back. And I love the way that in Element City, Ember is not barred from anywhere. At least currently, there's a flashback in her past where she wasn't allowed to go to a place because she was fire. No fire allowed, right? Like, fire's dangerous. She can go anywhere she wants, but she's so uniquely alone. There are no fire people in Element City. Like, you don't see them when she's walking in a huge crowd full of these cloud beings and these earth creatures and water people. Like, there's never another fire person, and she's so uniquely alone. But she also burns brightest, right? She's the most visible because she's fire and everybody can see her. So she like puts on a hoodie and like tries to hide, and like that visual of somebody who feels so out of place in a place where technically you can go anywhere, right? Technically you're a part of this, but like you don't really feel like a part of it is really great. And like I thought that was really stellar, like directing and art direction to make her feel like she's not a part of a place where she, technically is. I thought that was really good stuff.
Yeah, I think the movie does a lot of good showing and not telling. Like one of the great sequences, it kind of shows Ember and her dad growing up together in the shop, and you kind of see the dad begin to struggle with kind of the daily tasks. Like they do a thing where they crush logs to make a product, and that gets harder and harder for her dad. Or her dad starts coughing a lot, and he's like coughing soot, to just demonstrate the aging process. It's a lot of really clever things that the movie does it does a lot of showing, not telling, which is always great to see in cinema. I wanted to talk about the animation a little bit because this is this is a $200 million film, and you see the money on screen. Like the animation for this movie not getting a lot of press or a lot of buzz, the animation's pretty stunning, and it does look incredible. Like Ember and the flame people are constantly in just this kind of roiling motion of fire, and it's reflected through their emotions. Like Ember loses her temper a lot, and she gets like brighter. She turns purple. Element City's really impressive. You have lots of water effects everywhere. I was really impressed with the animation.
Yeah, I think one of the things worth mentioning for Pixar is how they always push the medium forward. Like a lot of people skip Lightyear, and one of the things I liked most about Lightyear was just how stellar it looks. Like their lighting effects, the way they like work with materials now is insane. Like it is so wild how good Lightyear looked, even though not that many people went and saw it. Elemental, I think, mostly gets into that space. Our individual characters, you've seen the designs, right? Like you're probably familiar, are odd and cartoony, right? They're weird, but a lot of the background stuff, a lot of the environmental work is really stellar. The way water flows in this movie looks amazing. And I don't mean Wade, the water person, right? I mean just general water, because there is a difference. Not all water is sentient in the world of Elemental. And the way water splashes and flows like looks really incredible. A lot of the general design of the world, right? Like you've got a lot of elements working amongst each other. You've got cloud people that have their own form of transportation. They use these blimps, and then the earth people like have this whole subway thing. Like the way the city comes together is really clever, especially because you don't spend that much time in it. Like most of the movie takes place in kind of the Firetown area, which is just outside of the city or really kind of under it. And I think that's really clever. Like it doesn't try to do the Zootopia angle where it's like, hey, we're going to show everybody doing their thing. And I do think that may feel a little truncated, honestly. For 90 minutes, the movie moves really fast, like very efficient pacing. It's so much so that I think they may have had some issues in post-production. And I think somebody from Disney might have been like, tighten this up. This movie's 20 minutes too long. Make it shorter, make it faster, abbreviate this scene, figure out a reason for Wade to be here when it doesn't really make sense. Some of the character motivations, like, just seem odd and out of place. I don't want to get into it without talking spoilers, but overall, like for a kids flick, like I think it does a fine job. The problem is like I don't think it's a very good kids movie. I think it's more of like a romance. That's kind of the A plot for me, right? Or Andy, do you think it's more about Element City and infrastructure and being different?
I mean, to me, the Ember's dilemma with her kind of the immigrant story was the main plot, and then the romance with Wade is kind of the B plot more for me. But one of the things that Pixar was known for was making movies for kids that were still very engaging for adults, and this doesn't quite do that to the same extent as some things like Toy Story or The Incredibles or Finding Nemo, kind of those earlier Pixar films. But I mean that's a really high bar to me, but I think this is a really good entry still, and I mean I think this is probably the best of their last five or six releases.
Yeah, I don't think I quite agree with that. I put Turning Red on my top 10 like the other year, man. Like I thought Turning Red was really stellar, and I really enjoyed Soul as well. I know people that like Luca. Like I think Pixar is doing this high concept work that is really clever, but like it just doesn't bring in numbers like their earlier stuff did, or their sequel stuff, which seems to be where they're headed after Elemental. I know there's Elio that we had a trailer for. It's their next feature. And I know Bob Iger said they're doing Toy Story 5, by God. So Tom Hanks, dust off your cowboy boots, right? Like you're turning up once again. I do want to talk about the short that ran in front of this real quick.
Yeah.
The short that runs in front of this is called Carl's Date. It's about Carl from Up, the Pixar movie. He is having a date. First one since Ellie passed away, God rest her soul, and him and his dog Doug have to get ready and prepare for him to go out and do this big thing as an old guy who shouldn't be afraid of dates. Andy, I have a hot take on this, but I just wanted to see your general impressions before I drop in with it.
So these shorts can range from like, I mean, where they will make you cry to you'll fall asleep. And this was kind of on the you might fall asleep in the middle of it. There were people in my screening that thought they were in the wrong movie, like they didn't realize they were still in a Pixar movie because it wasn't apparent that this was like a short. That this was you're supposed to see this. It's a little long. I think it's like 7 minutes, which feels long for a short. I mean, it was fine. It just it seemed really disjointed. Like I said, a lot of people didn't know what's going on. If you haven't seen Up, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. So I mean, I thought it was fine, but I would have rather seen something more original.
There's so many great Pixar shorts, right? Like too many to just quickly list on the show. There's so many films where something clever and original, like Boundin' or Jerry's Game or that snowman run that runs in front of Finding Nemo, like Lifted, Presto in front of Wall-E. Like I was talking about it after we watched the movie just last night, and I think shorts are a great idea for Pixar and for Disney because nobody else does them anymore. They're unique. They feel cinematic. They make it feel like going to the theater for a Disney movie is different than every other movie because not only are you getting trailers, but you're getting a different slice of art. It helps kind of prep you. It helps you get ready for the water when you're diving into the movie proper. Like and we live in a time of short form content. Like I think shorts is a great idea. They should keep doing it. Keep that animation going. Share them online. Keep making shorts. That being said, nobody's going to say this is their favorite short. Like it is forgettable. It takes place almost entirely inside a house in like 3 rooms with some quick montage stuff. Like Carl's Date is bad, dude. And it feels like it's just advertising for this like series of shorts they're doing on Disney Plus for Up. Like this is kind of the Orient. It's like go to Disney Plus and check out our other Up content, and it's like huge miss. I was really excited to see a short in front of this. This is not the short you guys should have run. Like this one's weak. I mean, like just dude, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I did want to mention that before we got to final thoughts. And Andy, anything else for recommendations on Elemental?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Elemental?
Yeah, I would. I really enjoyed it, and I did not expect to. Like I said, I wasn't really excited by any of the trailers we'd seen or the things I heard, but it turned out to be a really pleasant surprise and surprisingly deep story about struggles of first and second generation immigrants to new places, along with just fitting in, meeting new people, meeting people that are different. And the animation looks really amazing. I was really surprised by this, so I would say highly recommend.
I'd say recommend if you're interested. Like if you like Pixar and you want to support animation and you want to, go check out something different, then yeah, I'd say go see this. But like it's a tough recommend coming just a couple weeks off of Spider-Verse, like an animated feature that is like mind-bogglingly good, like, and this is a completely different style of animation. It's much more traditional, but Elemental surprised me. Like I was surprised at what it brought to the table and how sincere it ends up being. I don't think it's Pixar's best. It's certainly not their worst. Like, yeah, I'd say go see Elemental if you can swing it. Otherwise, it'll be on Disney Plus in like 90 days. So you can just hang out. Yeah.
Or maybe next month.
I know. What a week at the movies, Andy. 3 episodes, a little long on the runtime, but I think we're doing okay. What are we watching next week?
Yeah, it's been a like I said, huge number of releases in the last just 3 weeks. It will start to slow down. Next week, we are seeing the wide release of Asteroid City, which is Wes Anderson's new film. We've heard a lot of great things. It had a good initial showing in New York and LA, so we're going to be catching that. We're also going to be taking a look at Extraction 2, the Netflix action film, which came out last week.